My name is Carley Childress. I'm the founder and CEO of Macorva, and I am not a people analytics professional. I'm actually a software developer by trade, and I chose to enter the employee engagement space a few years ago with my partner because we experienced a pain point that we found plenty of y'all experienced as well with the employee engagement effort, which is the biggest pain point with engagement surveys, with in general getting feedback from our employees, getting feedback from customers, getting feedback is getting actionable data. How do we take all of this information and translate it into productive steps for our organization? I experienced this myself and my partner did as well. It motivated us enough to look at the software behind feedback and what we could be doing to innovate in that space, because as we discovered in our due diligence, we think about the great talk from Red Thread and about how software is being used to help us create data. Well, while we've innovated so much in software over the last 20 years, we have changed a lot about how we collect the feedback. We're not using pen and paper surveys anymore. It's a lot more streamlined. But that data that we're creating is not really that different from those old school pen and paper surveys, right? We're asking high-level questions, we're getting high-level results from those questions, and then we put a heavy emphasis on open comments to help us fill in the blanks, fill in the specifics. But that's where our pain points come in, right? Because those open comments are really difficult for us to parse, really difficult for us to track over time, may not be really consistent across different groups or even the same person over time. And then we have that for our specifics, and then the very high-level results that our executive team can look at, can act on, but as we go deeper in the organization, we don't have a lot of productive action that can really be taken at our middle management level, certainly not at our individual contributor level. And those are the folks that make up the vast majority of your organization. So because of that, engagement kind of winds up being this pyramid effort where there's these folks at the very tippy top that are acting on the results, and then most of the people throughout the organization don't really have that actionable data to use to make productive changes. And so we wanted to think about how we could use software to create more specific data that could be used at different levels of the organization. And so we at Macorva use software to capture more specific by using what we call people-focused feedback that can be tracked, quantified, acted on at every level of the organization. And here's one example of how we do this. In our regular engagement survey that we deploy to our employees periodically, we're obviously going to ask those high-level questions. We want to know what's the engagement, what are those kind of core drivers of engagement at our organization. But then we also want to get the specifics. We want to know for this individual employee, for the people that you work with, the relationships that are this critical part of your experience working at our company, your manager, your team, the people you deal with each and every day. How much do you like working with them, and how would you describe them? And we remove that reliance on open comments by framing it with these very simple, I call them tappy taps, positive and negative attributes that we can use to say, this is my experience with this person, here's how I would describe them, and then I can move on and share my experience with anyone in the company, obviously with anonymity, but the results get more powerful from there at the individual level because everyone's giving feedback on their experiences. Everyone's receiving feedback. Everyone's getting something back out of this experience. It's not just a survey that goes up to management and then the individual employee never really gets anything back out of it. And this is also very trackable. We're taking these qualities that we want to see in our employees or that we want to identify and correct, and we're gauging how often someone says that you're friendly or knowledgeable, how often someone might say that you're a poor listener. We're not looking for these outliers. We're not looking for every single time someone says this, but when do we see this consistently? When 20% or 30% or 90% of the people who give you feedback check poor listener. Well, that's when we know this is something that we need to do something about. So at the employee level, it's very empowering to give people the ability to share these experiences with colleagues. We find on average average, the individual employee with our survey shares their experience with 19.2 coworkers. And that's the average. And this is, again, keep in mind, totally voluntary. So this is highly engaging for employees because they're sharing experiences that aren't just kind of high level overall working at the company, but the really personal specific experiences that they have with others. And then on the customer side of things, if you think about your employees who are in customer-facing roles, who are representing your brand, being able to give your customer that same opportunity to use a few taps on their smartphone to say, how was my experience at your facility? How would I describe it? And then what about that person that I dealt with? What about the sales associate, the service rep? What was my experience with them? How would I describe my experience there? And again, removing that emphasis on open comments so that we can track these qualities better and so that we can understand them and track them back to the specific employee that was associated with that experience, and taking the guesswork out of all of this data that we're collecting by making it more specific, more directed. And what the results look like. So I've shown you the experience that we provide of how you can, with a few taps, rate and describe your experience with anybody else, whether you're an employee, with your coworkers, or whether you're a customer working with an employee who's representing your brand. Well, what did the results look like for individuals, for managers, for everyone in the organization? And we're very proud that the results do really come together in ways that are specific, actionable, and again, people-focused. We create personalized, trackable feedback scores based on dozens of experiences with your coworkers or with your customers. So if we think about employees who are in customer-facing roles, those folks who are out there, they may or may not be dealing with any coworkers within your organization. They're out there moving product, or they're out there dealing with tickets. This is a way for you to really measure and track the impact they have on customer experience. So you can see the employees who they are consistently highly rated by your customers, and the outstanding attributes that customers use to describe them very consistently. So you can see that. You can give affirmation to those employees who are doing a great job with your customers. You can also find the employees who maybe aren't doing so great and help them by giving them more specific coaching based on the specific consistent feedback they receive from customers as well. And then for the employee feedback, so peer-to-peer, thinking about that internal experience. We can also use that to create these collective feedback scores where we're not focused on what one person said about working with you. We want to look at what all of the people who worked with you each and every day, when we put all of that together, what does that look like? What are the consistent attributes that emerge? And then can we identify patterns in your feedback? Are you getting great feedback overall? Are you getting great feedback overall, but then when we look at feedback coming from just management, it's not as high? Well, we can identify that as what we call, for example, here, a silent superstar, somebody who's got a really strong positive impact on the organization, but that connection with management, for whatever reason, just isn't as strong. This is the power of creating these feedback opportunities between all your employees and collecting it as specific data. You can then segment it out by the relationships that people have and say, okay, I can work on your dynamic with management. I can work on your dynamic with the team or with the people that you manage. All of this is actionable at every level of the organization. Your individual contributors are getting something out of it. They're getting feedback, as well as your managers helping to manage themselves and their own teams all the way up to the top of the organization. And I think I've hit my time, so I'll just invite you to come by our booth and see more of the software if you're interested in capturing a little bit more of that specific people-focused data. But thank you so much for your time.